So my task this morning was to sand all of these little fair spots where I did my various bubble repairs on these skids slash stiffeners. And I've sanded those all smooth, and I've cleaned up and solvent washed the bottom with paint thinner, which is why it looks dark at the moment, because that takes a while to evaporate. I like to use paint thinner a lot of the time because it allows a good two-cloth system. Acetone is great when you can use it, but it evaporates so fast. It's very hard to do a good, wet wipe and then dry off with a clean rag, the two-cloth method. So I used paint thinner this time to get this nice and clean. My next step from here is going to be bottom paint over the top of this, just the flat part. I'll establish a water line sometime later after the boat is turned over. There's a minor suggestion of it on the plans, but it's going to take some work to figure that out and do it the way I want to do it. And I need to glass the top sides. So all of that's going to happen later, but before we turn the boat over, I want to paint this flat bottom. It's the easiest time to do it. Still a lot of work ahead. Obviously getting the hull and bottom finished to this point is a significant milestone, but there's a lot of work left to finish up on this boat. But the bottom, I'm calling this done with these skids slash stiffeners. It's not the easiest thing to say, which is probably why I keep forgetting. Although by now I've honed it down with precision. So, bottom done except for paint. And that'll happen very soon. I've got paint on the way. Once I turn the boat over, I'm planning to put it on these 4 cheap dollies. I had to do some minor assembly on these to install the casters. But otherwise, these are ready to go. 1,000 pounds capacity each. So that's more than enough. So what I'm going to try with this eye bolt is I'm just going to hook up my hoist and see what the boat does from this one point, and see if I need to add a second point somewhere for balance. I have 2 of these eye bolts. I have a strap. This is just trying to figure out the best way to lift this. So I'm going to try this for right now. This is just an experiment. I'm not actually turning it yet. So far, that seems to be lifting the boat easily. Maybe just because of that temporary support on the stern, it's still lifting nice and evenly from bow to stern. It's not trying to twist or lift more heavily towards one end or the other. It's early yet. I've only lifted it a few inches. But I'm going to keep lifting this and see what happens. So it's effortless lifting, which is what I expect with the chain hoist. But the boat hasn't protested or anything like that. What I'm worried slightly about is that it might, as it gets lifted more, it might suddenly shift over as far as that trolley will go. So I've been standing off to the side. And this side is about to contact the ground at the lowest point. So whatever I do, I'm going to have to do some cushioning there of some sort just to prevent abrasion and, have a little bit of give. I've got tons of old towels and sheets and things that I can use. I don't know if I should jack the bow up and remove these blocks first. It's kind of a hard point where it's landing on this block that I used to support and level the hull before. It's almost like a pivot point. That in the corner of this aft support that I have here. I'm just musing. This is all about testing this out. This isn't about flipping it right now. This is about seeing what happens. Here's what it looks like from underneath. Again, it's going to contact the floor very soon on the starboard shear line. So it's time to think about protecting that. I'd say it's over 30 degrees maybe. That's why we're doing a dry run, to sort of work some of these questions through. So we'll see what else happens now. Then over here on the low side, I just taken some old blankets, stuck them under the corner of the hull, so as I lift it more this time, hopefully it'll rest on those and just resist abrasion. I'm on the starboard side. This is the bulkhead location here, bulkhead 12, these screw holes. And just forward of it on this line, this pencil line that happens to be there, it's resting on the shear line right now, down there against that pale green blanket. And when I move the hull around, you can see maybe just a little motion in the plywood there. It's just forward of the bulkhead, doesn't have any support. And that's kind of the point that this is resting on right now. So I'm thinking maybe a temporary reinforcement here, 2x4 screwed to the side or something like that. I mean, screw holes pose no problem. I don't want to go crazy with them, but screwing some extra boards to this to actually take the pivot seems like maybe a smart thing to do, and the screw holes I can deal with later. Yeah, I don't love the way I don't know if it'll show up on camera, but it's right here, right down at the blanket. And the more I raise this, it seems like that's going to take more strain until the boat actually tips. If that's going to be the pivot point and not the bulkhead, then I think I need to reinforce that a little. Just some scrap wood, lengths of 1x4 or 2x4, probably between the two bulkheads. This is bulkhead 12 right here. And then up forward here is 9.5, again where that epoxy line is. So I think if I were to span something that runs between those two strong points and extends down below the top of the hull just a little bit, so when this starts to tip, it'll actually rest on that. It's my current thinking, because this is the point where it's going to pivot. And that's okay, I think, if I reinforce it. So I'm going to try that before I do much more with this. So I don't know if this will work. I've got this board screwed to both of these bulkheads, and also in the middle, just to kind of help hold it. And it extends down beyond the gunnel by a fair bit. My thought is that that'll help stabilize the hull in there, and also give it a pressure point that it can rest on instead of the hull itself. So I'm just gonna, maybe I will reinforce this more, but for right at the moment, I'm just gonna try it as is and see what happens. See if it's helping the problem that I think it will help. Seems to be working. It's had the added benefit of raising it up off of the little aft leg, temporary aft leg, and also off of this forward support on which the boat was resting while upside down. I mean, I don't know how to make it any stronger than going across two bulkheads. And that movement right in the center where where the blue and the green blankets meet, it's definitely stronger. It's not moving so much. The other answer is to put a temporary cross brace inside the boat, which might be worth doing. 2x4 spanning that right between these two bulkheads, just to help add some strength. That won't be the funnest thing in the world to install, but I'll do it. I think that might be worthwhile. I'm going to lift this a little more and see what happens. Now you keep an eye on that for me and let me know if anything bad happens, because I'll be on the other side of the boat. So I've got that close to 45 degrees, and I think I could go more. I'm going to hold off for right now because I want to put a stiffener across the boat right where it's resting, because there will be a lot of pressure on that one point until the boat reaches almost 90 degrees. All the pressure is right there. So this is proof of concept. I think that's working well. I might put a few more screws in, because screw holes are easy to patch versus fixing something that I actually break. And I like how it's raised the boat up just enough to lift off the two other pressure points, so it's just going to rest on this one wide spot. which is really what I want. And you know, once I get it to 90 degrees and it rests on this chine and this strong bottom, then I won't be worried about it to lift the other side. Maybe I'll try and get the bottom on a couple of these dollies so that the bottom of the boat that's touching the ground can slide when we try to pull the other side down. That's going to be another tricky thing that I guess we're not really going to figure out till we get there. But yeah, this is, you know, it's taken nothing to lift it like this, and I've learned a lot just from doing this. I've learned the weak point. What I'm trying to do here is flip this boat with the minimum of extra work. I mean, I don't want to have to build huge structures or extra lifts, or you know, I want to flip it. I think the boat is simple and strong. It's got all its internal structures in place. A lot of boats that you see flipped on the internet are they were built over temporary frames or strongbacks, and they have no permanent internal structural members yet when they get turned over. This boat already has all its internal structure in place, and all its external structure for that matter, except the deck. So it's about as strong as it's ever going to be, and we only have to do this once. So I'm tending to keep a minimalist approach. If I throw a couple of these dollies under this side as it starts to become near vertical, right underneath the chine, then that'll help, because we're going to have to pull this side all the way over eventually. And if the bottom that's resting on the ground, if the chine that's resting on the ground can actually roll, it might make that easier. Just random thoughts at the moment. I don't know. I've never done this before. But it's gone well to this point. I think we have something that's workable. Wouldn't take much to get this up to 90 degrees at this point. The only reason, well, a couple reasons why I'm not. I haven't painted the bottom yet. And I'm going to make sure I get that done as soon as I can. But this dry run is totally worth it because it's taught me a couple things. And while I won't enjoy getting inside and working on that 2x4 across, I think that's a no-brainer to add some strength right where the boat is going to be actually resting. And, you know, I figured it was going to be on the widest part, obviously. That's why I put I'm really happy with where I put the eye bolt. That seems to be doing a great job. And when we get this up vertical and it's probably stable on its side, I'll either remove that to help lift the other side, or, well, we'll figure something else out. I have another one of these eye bolts. I don't know what it's going to take to flip it past 90 degrees the other direction. I have a couple ideas of what to do, but, you know, until it's there, if we just get it past that tipping point in a safe way, it'll be easy enough. But I might have to move the lift to the opposite side to let it down. Well, no, this will be the high. I don't know. We will figure it out. Pardon my rambles. Right now I'm going to lower the boat back down and install that brace between bulkheads 12 and 9, basically right between them. And that'll help strengthen the boat right where the pressure is going to be as we do this flip. So I'm not going to crawl in there again because I'm sick of crawling in there, but I got that 2x4 installed. It's the lowest thing you can see right there. And it runs across the hull between bulkhead 12 and bulkhead 9.5, which is just forward. Fits friction fit between the hull, and then it's screwed through the hull into the end grain of the 2x4. It's a stiffener. It's not going to be under tension. It's going to be under compression. So that should just help stiffen up the hull there, right where it's going to bend. Or not bend, but where it's going to pivot, which is going to be right over here on the starboard side of the hull. At some point in turning this boat, it's essentially going to hang from this eye bolt. We're not going to lift it far, but it's going to have to be lifted a little. So just to reinforce it a little bit, I put some scrap fiberglass here, 1/2 inch thick, as a backing plate on the inside, along with the big washer that I used. So it's just one more thing to help hold this nice and securely. The eye bolt's rated for lifting, so that should be more than adequate to hold the boat, but I just didn't want anything pulling through the plywood. The last thing to finish before turning the boat over is paint the bottom. That's now done. Well, this is one coat. I'd like to do 2. I'll do a second coat as soon as this dries enough. But I've just done the flat part of the bottom. I'll figure out the water line and the sides later and finish that up once the boat is turned over. But this is the easiest time to do the bottom part. It looks good. It's always nice to get the first paint on the boat, whatever it is. I think everything looks good. I'm real happy with it. What can I say? It's bottom paint. Not much to say about it. I'll do a second coat whenever this dries enough. It'll probably be tomorrow. So I did 2 coats of blue anti-fouling paint on the flat part of the bottom. I used this Seahawk ablative paint, relatively inexpensive compared to some. This used about a 1/2 gallon, a little bit over 1/2 gallon to do 2 coats on this. It's quite a bit of area. So that looks good. I'm happy with that. It's just bottom paint. Nothing fancy about the application. Brush and roller. Brush for the edges of all these skids / stiffeners. Does not roll off the tongue. And then a roller for everything else. First coat took maybe 45 minutes. Second coat took under 1/2 hour. So bottom paint. Looks good. Nice to have that on. There's really nothing to talk about with bottom paint. It's about the most basic minimal painting that there is. But I'm real happy with how this turned out. Bottom looks nice. The work I put into the bottom certainly paid off, such as it was. And I'm very anxious to turn this boat over. That's the next thing. Filmed from every angle, it's this. So I plan for turning this boat is to lift it up to 90 degrees, basically on its side with this arrangement here, this hoist. It's a 1 or 2 ton chain hoist, I forget, but more than enough for this boat. I figure this boat's about 600 pounds right now. Lift it up with that until I can rest it on the starboard chine. And the chine sticks out, so that's going to actually be helpful. From there, it's more of a question mark, but we've got to flip it past center, in other words, flip it past its upright point of balance so that the bottom starts coming down towards the floor. We had to puzzle out for a while how to do it safely, because the one thing that was key to avoid, beyond hurting ourselves, obviously, which was the #1 thing, but the one thing that was key to avoid was any major shock loads on the boat and its lifting points, or the crane. I mean, this is a sturdy crane, but I didn't want any sudden shocks. I didn't want to test anything, obviously. That's how you break stuff. So we were very cautious as we reached that point and realized that the boat was kind of resisting our efforts, and what we didn't want was to push it and have it come up hard on the crane or something else. So we took quite a bit of time to think about that. Ultimately, we ended up with a line attached to the top of the boat where the hoist was, and John was able to hold that back pretty well, but as we got over the top, he started to feel that it was a little too heavy, and I helped him grab the line. We were able to keep the boat from slamming down too hard, but even so, it tipped more robustly onto the chine than we had expected, that I had planned for. Now, it didn't cause any damage. Unfortunately, the chine is a very strong part of the boat. But it wasn't what we planned. It was definitely more aggressive than I had expected. But all that being said, it didn't cause any harm. And once it was there, the boat was very stable once more, so we could spend some time and figure out how best to get it down the rest of the way. We had some tension on the hoist, and we were trying to push the boat across the floor to give us some more room so that we could lower it. That's when this break occurred. So this is the one casualty we had. This hole here is where I had installed the eye bolt to lift the boat. And I put it intentionally close to the bulkhead because I thought it would be the strongest place and it wouldn't put too much pressure on the paneling itself. And once we got the boat up on its side, obviously there was too much pressure up on this eye bolt. And what it did is it actually broke the plywood. Didn't break the epoxy, it broke the plywood. Never underestimate the power of epoxy. The fillet is untouched. The wood just pulled away from the back of the fillet. There's a little skim of wood on the back of the fillet. And that's what broke free. It only broke a few inches down. This is totally repairable. It's not a big deal. I mean, of course I didn't want it to happen. We were very careful not to cause any damage, but this was unexpected, and we dealt with it as soon as we saw it. And hindsight is 20/20, so of course, you know, I would do things differently. And considering what we were doing and what we didn't know, no one got hurt. Boat barely got hurt. So as minimalist an approach as I took to this task of turning this boat, this is nothing. When we got the boat tipped up on its side, and when it tipped up, of course, from the position it was in, it ended up quite close to the other side of the shop. So in order to flip it the whole way, we needed to move the boat back across the shop. But I hooked up a 4-to-1 block and tackle between the boat and the wall, the nearby wall. And I was going to use that to pull it, and it did work. I used a piece of hardware that I found in my used stock and it had a nice eye strap on it, or a nice welded eye, I should say. And I screwed that to the framing in the wall. And I pulled on the block and tackle like the second or third time, because it did move the boat and it was working without too much effort. But when I pulled on it the third time, it pulled that hardware right out of the wall, pulled the screws right out, and I went tumbling into the boat. But that wasn't the best moment of the day. And once that had failed for us, then the two of us were able to push the boat across the floor manually from the bottom side, and we got it back across to where it needed to be so that we could continue to lower it down the rest of the way onto its bottom. Well, what we ultimately did to get around this was I drilled a hole through the bulkhead just underneath this deck beam, and we put the strap through that, and that worked a treat. And that's probably what I should have done from the get-go. You know, little minor lesson that doesn't cause any major damage. I can live with that. Once the boat was lying on its side, on the starboard side, with this port chine up in the air, and having caused this damage up above where I had it secured, we realized what we really needed to do was a way to lower it from the chine, which would be the safest way, because that was going to be the kind of the furthest point, if you will. And it's much more clear from the footage. So what we ended up doing is I drilled a small hole, it's a 3/8 hole, right through the chine, and put a small line through there, and we hooked the crane to that, and that's the rig we used to lower the boat down the rest of the way. And that worked well, caused no problems. That hole is no big deal to patch, and it's going to get glassed over on the top again. I'll patch the bottom side so that it's completely glassed. I look at a small hole like that as no big deal. So I didn't hesitate when it became clear that this is what we had to do to lower it. That was just a minor thing to do, and I didn't mind it at all. So I can do an easy fix there. Glad the boat isn't all finished or anything like that. Once the crane had tension on the new lift point on the chine that I drilled, then lowering it was effortless and painless and non-traumatic. But getting it from its first stable balance point past it in a safe way that wasn't going to cause any shock on the crane or the lifting point, that took some thinking. We conceived a few ideas. Finally, what I did is I took an old 4-to-1 main sheet tackle from some boat in my past or another, and we hooked it up to the crane up here at the top of the A-frame. And that gave us a controlled way to help lower the boat down and keep pressure against the high side and ease it down to the point that the crane would start to take up the tension. And that worked pretty well. There was a lot of friction in that system, so it was not a lot of strain for John to hang on to. And before long, needed some persuasion on our part on the low side of the boat in order to get the push started, because the boat was resting right on its curviest amidships point, and it just kind of didn't want to go. The boat the bow and stern wanted to move back and forth and just sort of pivot. It didn't really want to tip. It took a little time to work these things out. We spent a lot of time sort of talking about it and thinking through various processes and coming up with ideas and abandoning them because they were unsafe or impractical, or I didn't have what I needed to do it. What would have really been nice was a second hoist on my crane. That would have been awesome, but of course I don't have that. I think despite not having every little duck completely in order, I like to think that the planning and taking care to make sure that what we did was safe, especially to us, but also to the building and to the boat. I like to think that made a difference and that we ended up being safe because we spent a lot of time trying to be safe.